That is a question, though. Is it actually possible to have a perhaps egalitarian society where all of these things are possible, where human needs are met and realized, where the destruction of the planet isn't connected to the way that our lives are organized, where racism and sexism and transphobia and all of these oppressions that exist in this society, are these things, the absence of these things, actually compatible in a free market capitalist system?
Well, you know,
we're among friends.
No, I think it's a critically important question, because there is a temptation, and I'm going to speak now just particularly about kind of the narrative of racial progress in Black communities and I think many other communities of color, which is a narrative that measures progress by kind of how far up you make it on a totem pole that is constructed within a capitalist model. And I think we're often raised on, and I'll speak for myself, I was raised on a notion of the American dream that if you just get yourself a really good education and you work hard, then the sky is the limit, but you got to do that. And our work is to ensure that more people have a really good education so that they then can get that good job and get that house and get that car and make their way up the ladder. But as we've seen in recent decades, is that global capitalism leaves entire communities behind. That global capitalism depends on surplus labor. In a global capitalist society, not everybody gets to work. And if we want an egalitarian, multiracial, multi-ethnic society in which everyone has the right to work and earn a fair wage and equality of education and universal health care, these are not pipe dreams. It is difficult to see how we can get that in a global capitalist economy where at the slightest temptation, a corporation can pack up, move overseas, find a new plantation, new labor to exploit, and leave entire communities behind. And so I think especially today, as technological innovation is rendering thousands of jobs irrelevant, redundant, unnecessary, and as we see a world in which capital can flow freely across borders, corporations can move overnight at the drop of a hat, money can cross borders, but people can't. We have to begin to ask ourselves serious questions about whether it's really possible to have an egalitarian, multiracial, multi-ethnic capitalist democracy. And, I have come to the view that I think is one that Dr. King shared at the end of his life, and that many freedom fighters have come to, W.E.B. Du Bois, many, I could list them, that something like a democratic socialist model, where every human being has a basic guarantee of a quality education, quality housing, the right to work at a fair wage, universal health care, that these are basic human rights, human needs that every human being should be entitled to. And that doesn't mean the end of all business or all entrepreneurship. It doesn't mean that. But it means that as a starting point, we have got to be willing to honor people's basic human rights and insist upon an economy that will ensure that every voice and every life truly matters. And if you look at some other nations, I'm not going to point to any and say they've got it all right, but they're much further down the road than we are. You know, there are countries that are considered socialist, at least according to Hillary Clinton and Trump, that actually provide quality education to every resident, that provide free health care, free college education, that have very few people behind bars, that have universal health care for every citizen. There are nations like this, and Norway comes to mind. There are others. Now, these tend to be very homogeneous countries. And, you know, what the research shows is that the most punitive nations in the world are the most diverse. And that the nations that have the most generous social welfare programs are the most homogeneous. And so there is this punitive impulse to those we conceive as others, to deny them the benefits that we want to control for us, and to have a punitive impulse towards the others. And so really the American experiment poses the question of whether we here on this land that was stolen, in this nation that was born of slavery and genocide, whether we can here build a multiracial, multi-ethnic, egalitarian democracy. And that will require, I believe, a radical revolution of values, where we open our hearts and our minds to those we have been taught to believe are others, beyond our care of concern.